Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of Sunday, December 22nd, 2024. We are pleased to offer you what I think will be one of the most fascinating conversations we're going to have this year, and we have some fascinating conversations, as you know. It is a conversation about the replacement approach to combating aging. And we have today our distinguished panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, our member from Texas who leads the Texas Transhumanist Party, Alan Crowley, and our Foreign Ambassador in Spain and Technology Advisor, Dr. Jose Cordero. And coming back for the third time now is Kai Micah Mills. We previously had him on as a guest to discuss Cryopets, which offers cryopreservation services for pets, as well as HydraDAO, his decentralized autonomous organization focusing on cryopreservation research. And now he is going to tell us about a new DAO that he has founded called HydraDAO. And HydraDAO is extremely fascinating. You can learn more about it on its website at HydraDAO.org. Its mission is to enable biological replacement parts for humans, including whole body replacement, with the ultimate goal of radically extending the human lifespan. HydraDAO pursues an engineering approach to solving aging, aiming for total replacement of aged body parts with lab-grown young parts. So I think this will be of great interest to a lot of our viewers. Kai, please tell us more.
Yeah, wow. Where do we start? First of all, good to see everyone. I remember we were talking at RadFest, and we were saying, as soon as I launch Hydra, I want to come back on the podcast and talk about it. So here we are, and that was only a few short months ago. I actually thought it was going to take a little bit longer to launch, but our timelines got accelerated quite a bit with sort of the recent excitement in crypto, the recent excitement in DeSci. It's kind of opened a lot of opportunity for us to build this now. So yeah, I mean, anyone who's in the life extension field, knows there's these different approaches to either solving or bypassing aging, right? And I think the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, their roadmap actually separates these quite well. At least the leading options that we have, they sort of separate into three paths that we can take, and these are specifically only paths that can lead to indefinite lifespan extension. And that's number one is bioengineering, number two is replacement, and number three is biostasis. And as you guys know, and as most people know me from, I come from the biostasis field, or the cryo field, and that's really what I've dedicated all of my time to over the past couple of years, since about 2022, 2021, 2022, and it's the replacement and cryo fields are unique from any of the other approaches because they are engineering approaches. They have significantly less unknowns. They're cheaper, they're more realistic, and this is a lot of what the roadmap that they developed goes into as well. I remember talking with Nathan Chang and a lot of these other guys about this really early on, and we were like, we need to start moving replacement forward. I mean, the main reason that I jumped into cryo is because I don't believe that we are on track to solve aging in our lifetimes. And with most of these approaches, I still unfortunately stand firm on that, and I haven't seen anything that would convince me otherwise. But replacement was always like, okay, maybe, right? Like this specific approach is, I think there's still are unknowns. There's a lot of there's certainly a lot of issues with it. But when you compare it to these other approaches to bypassing or solving aging, it actually seems like it might be doable in our lifetimes, maybe sooner rather than later. So it's always been very very interesting to me, and I think the original spark for why it was interesting to me was Jean Hebert in his book Replacing Aging. That was, when I read that and I got to talk with him in person, I think maybe one of the Foresight events back in 2022 or so. I was like, wow, a lot of this is possible, and a lot of it has already been done to certain degrees. Specifically talking about whole body replacement here. We've done cloning. We've done head transplants on primates, right? We're not even talking about mice here. I mean, these are amazing breakthroughs, and they happened, many decades ago. And then everything slowed down. A lot of the cool science just stopped, right? Because of overregulation and a whole myriad of things. But it's time to bring the cool science back. It's time to start accelerating these fields that have really been in cryostasis, if you will, for many decades, and replacement is one of those fields. And a lot of people too, if they look at this from the outside, they might see these as totally unrelated strategies to solving the death problem. But they actually have so much overlap, and this is why it makes so much sense for us to build HydraDAO alongside CryoDAO, because in a lot of ways they sort of enable each other and require each other to pull this off, especially if we're talking about the organ level and having organs on demand, tissues on demand. Whether you have a clone of yourself and you're getting a kidney from that clone. Maybe we're growing a kidney from scratch. Maybe it's any way that we're getting these organs for you, in order to have to realistically have organs on demand at scale. You need a way to put them into stasis. You need to have them on the shelf, ready to go whenever that person needs them. And cryo is really what enables that to happen, right? So there's so much overlap between these two fields, and a lot has been happening with CryoDAO. A lot of the projects we've been advancing on the organ level as well has really shown that in the coming years we're going to be able to have more and more of these. It's going to become increasingly realistic to have organ banks, so it's a marriage of these two fields. And so I think that's one thing that makes it really exciting. But yeah, so HydraDAO, it's about really advancing this idea of replacement. If cryo is about whole body cryopreservation, but there's all these ways to commercialize it along the way on the organ level and tissue level and everything. Replacement is almost the exact same. There's all these different ways to commercialize it on the way, on the organ level, on the tissue level, and then you have the goal of whole body replacement versus whole body cryopreservation. There's so much that connects these fields, and that's why we chose to dive in. I honestly didn't really want to be the one to do it. I have my hands full. I don't get enough sleep as it is. I'm exhausted. But I sort of would bring this idea up all over X, all over within private meetings about replacement, about how it would make so much sense for there to be a DAO around this, how we need to advance this research. And 2 years went by and no one built it. No one even started building it. So I was like, shit, all right, guess I got to do another organization and shave a couple hours off my sleep every night. But it is what it is. We these things have to move forward. I believe this is probably the best bet we have at getting past this aging problem in our lifetime, and there's practically no focus on it. So yeah, that's HydraDAO.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Kai, for that overview. And you mentioned several individuals and organizations which I think are worthy to emphasize. First of all, in regard to the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, their roadmap is quite fascinating. And we did have a longevity fireside chat with Mark Hamalainen of the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, one of the co-founders, as well as Anastasia Yegorova, who is taking a crucial role as well in bringing more people into the longevity field. And you can watch it here. It's from April 2024, so quite recent, and it gives a good status update of the progress of the Longevity Biotech Fellowship. Jean Hebert is, of course, a fascinating individual, and we did have a salon with him as well in April of 2021. You can watch it here. And more recently, he became a program manager at ARPA-H, which is quite a breakthrough for our field because it will allow him to get significantly more funding to explore the possibilities of incremental brain tissue replacement. And indeed, Mark Hamalainen also now works on Jean Hebert's team at ARPA-H. So we are enthusiastic to see where they can take these concepts. Now, I do wonder, Kai, from your perspective, how would the work of HydraDAO intersect with Jean Hebert's approach with regard to incremental replacement of brain tissue? You alluded to this a bit at the end of our previous salon on CryoDAO, where you mentioned the brain is the one organ that cannot be replaced wholesale. So it would seem that some sort of incremental replacement approach would be needed to keep the brain young, unless you can just rejuvenate individual neurons one by one using, let's say, less invasive techniques.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the fact that Jean Hebert is at ARPA-H now, whatever impact people think that has, it's probably even significantly higher. I think so much is going to come out of that. I actually had a call with him maybe 5 days ago, specifically about how Hydra and him and what they're doing there can sort of accelerate and move all this forward. There's a lot. There's a lot that we can do. I think what we found, and especially in 2025, what we're going to find with these DAOs is they're incredibly well at spinning out and commercializing different IP and different research that comes out of these projects. So that's probably the first easy thing to note is through HydraDAO we'll be able to sort of get initial funding and spin out new companies, probably partially funded by the DAO as well, which is important. And but yeah, I mean his work and brain tissue replacement is probably the most important step of all of it. So it's amazing that is kind of at the forefront of what he's pushing forward there. There will be a lot of projects that we can co-fund with them. And I think the big thing is that there are projects that ARPA-H cannot fund for whatever reasons, right? XYZ reasons. Maybe it deals with something that's a little too controversial. Maybe there are these certain barriers, and I have some in mind, but I won't list them here just because I don't know how sort of public it is. But there are these three or four areas that come to mind that they literally just cannot fund. They're not allowed to fund, but are necessary. And the DAO, of course, can fund anything, right? It's extremely flexible what we're able to do at the DAO. So I think those are the big ways. We're going to co-fund things, we're going to fund things that they can't, and we're going to commercialize a lot of the things that come out of this field. And but yeah, I mean, super excited to work with him and Mark and a lot of them over there, because yeah, there really is a huge opportunity. I think I think it's possible that we're coming up on sort of like a golden age of cryo and replacement over this next year and the years to come. I think there's a lot of pieces kind of falling together. There's a lot of pieces that a lot of people don't even realize on the political side, on different new funding organizations jumping in, to where I think the timing here is really special. And yeah, definitely excited to focus on the brain tissue stuff. I think it's even it's the number one sort of bullet point on our website at HydraDAO.org, is the brain tissue replacement. So that's a huge focus for sure. We were even talking about a company that sort of needs to exist right now for this, and it could very well be the first thing that HydraDAO incubates as far as a new company. So maybe before long we'll be able to talk about that. So
yes, indeed. And I am similarly enthusiastic about the prospects that are likely to arise from Jean Hebert's work and influence at ARPA-H. Now, you mentioned various historical scientific achievements that have been made in the replacement field, whereafter the field essentially stagnated. Could you describe some of the experiments that were performed, some of the knowledge that was gained from them, as well as the timeframes, so that our viewers have an understanding of what has been achieved already and what can be built upon?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel like so much of this happened between sort of the 50s, 60s to the 70s, and then a lot of it stopped. There were some really cool experiments back with transplanting dog heads. This was the Russians back during that time. I believe it was the 60s. And there's even videos of these that you can that you can watch. And but we had a HydraDAO launch video where we really focused down on the work that Robert White did in the 70s. I think it was the beginning of the 70s, and where he was able to do a full head transplant of a monkey, of a primate. And the story here is really crazy. He practiced doing these head transplants in the morgue, and so much work went into making this happen. And there's videos of the monkey afterwards, after this total head transplant took place, and it's alert, it's looking around, it's aware of its surroundings. There are still problems. It's paralyzed from the neck down because the spinal cord was severed, and I believe after 11 days or something in that range, the body ended up rejecting the head. So I believe the total survival time was 11 days. Now, when we talk about replacement today, and specifically whole body replacement, we sort of the idea there is that you would have a clone of yourself. You basically clone yourself. You knock out certain genes that would develop the brain, right? So we want to prevent the brain development. It's even another good reason that we called this Hydra, because I think it's and I forget the exact term. I think it's hydranencephaly, or something along those lines, where the brain doesn't develop, and this is something that happens naturally, unfortunately, but it does happen naturally. And the goal would be to kind of repeat this on purpose with these clones, so that you don't want to murder your clone to steal its body, right? You don't want it to be a living, thinking human. You want this to essentially just be a body, right? And then you could either do a head transplant or a brain transplant onto that body. So yeah, this, these experiments really took place many decades ago. But I think Robert White's work there was really incredible, really interesting to show what we would be able to do. And it's kind of the idea of, you're going to need to get a replacement of every single organ at some point, right? And not just organs. Just so much of your body is starts falling apart with age. And the idea is, instead of doing an individual organ transplant every time one of these organs starts to go, you can just swap out everything in one go, right? Almost everything. Of course, as we mentioned, you can't just get a new brain, because that's not you, right? So that's kind of the main idea behind it. But yeah, I think that's a lot of why DAOs are special. We have so much flexibility to fund exactly what we want to fund, and so we can take these fields like cryo, like replacement, that have been really stagnant, and really just, I wouldn't even say stagnant. I mean, if they were at the same rate they were at back then it'd be quite good. Even, they're not. There's nothing going on. A lot of the stuff is banned. You can't even work on it in a lot of countries. So it's as an example, at CryoDAO, we just funded a project with $1 million, and it's to bring a rat back from high sub-zero temperatures. So we for lack of better terms, just freeze and unfreeze a rat, and try to keep full functionality of the rat, and have it run through the maze again, and have it be happy and walking around. And the last time a whole body mammal revival attempt like this took place was I think the 50s, or another one maybe in the early 60s. Attempt. I'm not even talking about what was successful or not, or what worked well. The last time this was attempted was back then, which is just extremely bizarre. I mean, it's these things, they haven't been stagnant. They've just been dead. They've been completely non-existent. And I think what we're seeing is that with DAOs, we can really start to bring this work back. So I think with Cryo we're doing that, and now with Hydra, with replacement, I think we're gonna really be able to fund some cool work. So.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Kai, for that historical overview. And indeed, the condition you were referring to is called hydranencephaly. And it's interesting to consider some of the reasons why that field had stagnated. Of course, Soviet researchers in the mid-20th century had very different ethical standards from researchers today. Davi Padilla Mesquita writes, the head replacement experiment by the Russians in dogs was creepy. In his view, the dogs died after a few hours, but this was in the middle of the 20th century, and he believes we should do better with humans in the future. John H. thinks animal experiments of that sort are absolutely grotesque, and that may have been part of the reason why they haven't been performed subsequently, because ethical standards with regard to animal experimentation have changed since that time. Mike Lazine wonders if PETA has posed a problem with using animals for research. I have many ethical problems with PETA, because PETA has no compunction with euthanizing completely healthy animals because they oppose pet ownership, and they think euthanasia is more humane than adopting out those animals. But I have had this kind of moral outrage at PETA for quite some time, and I don't think they're in a position to dictate ethical standards. Nonetheless, of course, even with experiments, we would ideally seek to prolong the lives of animals rather than shortening them. I do wonder what you think of the work of Sergio Canavero, who is a surgeon who has performed some of these attempted head transplants. My understanding is he was doing them on animals who were already dead, at the time, and he was primarily trying to show the ability to reconnect tissues and nerve endings that had been severed. But my understanding is also he has a bit of a way to go before such a procedure is ready to be performed on a living creature. But I wonder if you know more about this or could share more insights.
Yeah, totally. So I guess, to start on the animal experiments comments. Yeah, I think yeah, especially probably if the Russians wanted this to be widely accepted, maybe doing it on puppy dogs to start wasn't maybe wasn't the most ideal model organism. I think also I mentioned to do this in a really ethical way. We're talking about cloning these bodies and making it so the brain doesn't develop at all. So it's not it's not another animal or another human that you're killing to sort of enable this transplant to happen. It's just a body. It's a body without a mind. So that's number one. But you're exactly right. I mean, so much of this stuff is much more regulated now. There's a lot of hangups to where you're able to actually perform these experiments. So I think approaching them in obviously the best way possible. I mean, let's say you're taking let's still take a dog, for example. But let's say you're taking an old dog that's getting close to the end of its life, and then you're making a clone of it. The clone doesn't have a brain. You grow this body. And then you do a head transplant where when the dog was going to die, right, with the attempt to extend its life, right. This is none of this example that I just mentioned is I certainly wouldn't consider it grotesque. I would consider it an attempt at keeping that dog from dying, which of course is the greatest act that you can do for any living thing. And it's also worth noting that we have hundreds of thousands of people dying every single day, and we need to solve this, right? So if there are it's it needs to be done. It needs to be done the right way, and we need to approach it. And I am. You will not find someone who loves animals more than I do. When I found this out when I was a kid. I went fishing for the first time with my dad, and we caught a couple fish. I think we caught 2 fish and put them in a bucket. I think we were going to go cook them up at home or something. And I think we ended up pulling into the driveway, and I don't know, maybe I was 7 years old, 8 years old or something. And I'm just crying my eyes out over this fish. I'm like, no, why did we kill the fish? Why did we do that? I actually made my dad drive all the way back to the pond and put the fish back in the pond. I don't even know if it was alive at that point, but that was kind of when I realized, like, wow, I really love animals. I started Cryopets because I don't want my cat to die. She's one of the most important things in the entire universe to me. So I am 100% on board for approaching these things in an extremely ethical way, but also we are dying. We need to solve this problem, and nothing can get in the way of us solving that problem. So I'll note that. And when it comes to Canavero, it was funny. We this guy, a lot. He does have a pretty negative reputation, which in general I don't mind. I'm certainly someone who is not scared by affiliating myself with or working with people who have a negative reputation. So it's not something that scares me off from that, certainly in any way. I do think there are things that he could have done better in his approach. I think he tried to move to humans, and tried to advance that just far too quickly. And I haven't had a chance to talk with him. I think maybe it's because it could be any number of things. You know, I don't want to say where he was coming from on that, and maybe he could, you know, I'm not even sure if he's really on our side with if he's an immortalist. I actually have no idea. I'm not too familiar with him personally, but it could have been that, and just trying to move fast and advance this as quickly as possible, which I can understand. But certainly there's so much work that needs to be done in animals first before we can even think about going to humans. So yeah, I you know, we funded an experiment, or we're going to fund an experiment with Hydra, but we've been working with them already on spinal cord fusion, and we had someone comment, you know, in our chat and sort of say, you know, this guy published with Canavero, you know, a couple of years ago. Is this guy even the real deal? Is he, you know, this and that? Because even, and I think the paper was just Canavero's opinion on his work. It wasn't even like you know, them doing a project together, but sort of, you know, even being somewhat affiliated with him as sort of brought these negative things. So that's something to note. I think, I mean, we're doing head transplants. We're doing really, really crazy stuff. I think no matter what you're going to get people that push back on it and think you're crazy and think you're scamming and think you're doing all these things. And that's okay. As long as it's real science and you're you know, you're moving forward in intelligent ways. I think it's fine that you have pushback in that case. So I haven't talked to them personally. I'm looking forward to it. I think I'll definitely be interested to have that chat. But also, you know, this field in general, when you talk about head transplants, shouldn't just be like one guy that comes to mind. You know, we really need to expand this. We need to get different labs working on it. We need to have incentive prizes and have challenges that 10, 20, 30 labs around the world get involved in and try to compete for. There's a lot that we need to do to build this field. So it's going to take some time.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that answer. And in our YouTube chat, Davi says that what you stated was very reasonable. If a dog is going to die from aging anyway, it is reasonable to test whatever can save it and use this as an opportunity for researching new technology. I'm thinking of all those situations where people elect to have pets euthanized after a vet tells them that there's nothing more that could be done for a particular condition, though theoretically it may be possible to keep that pet alive for a bit longer with either some intensive medical care or palliative care. But in those circumstances, if a body transplant is a way to prolong the life of that pet, potentially, that could be a case for essentially undertaking a trial of the sort. And Alan Crowley also wrote that it seems immoral not to test on animals without essentially having any sort of way to ascertain the viability of a technique before we proceed to humans. So he would be of the opinion that we shouldn't be going directly to human trials. And you said that perhaps Canavero went to at least announced human trials too quickly. I don't think he actually went through with them, based on my understanding. Now, Jose has a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, and congratulations, Kai, on what you are doing. So I have two questions. One is in your first project, in Cryopets. How is it moving along? And how do you see it coming up in the next 5 years? And the second question is, overall, are you more optimistic or less optimistic about us reaching longevity escape velocity in the next 10, 20 years?
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, Cryopets. You know, it's been a little bit since we chatted about it. And I can't remember exactly when that salon was, but it was a little bit of time ago. You know, we are at the point now where there's a few medications and some items that I'm unable to get where the lab is right now because it's been in a temporary place. You need certain licenses and so on to get these things. But we can perform the first case almost immediately. We spent this time developing a lot of these pieces from the ground up. We had help from Alcor and Tomorrow and these other organizations, and but some of the things we looked at and we were like, well, we're just going to develop this completely from scratch because we think we can improve it in this way or that way. So we can perform the first cases almost immediately. We still need to move into the new facility, which I'm hoping we'll be able to do before long. Still here in Salt Lake City, but it'll be large enough and permanent enough to actually start taking in pets. The big thing now is timing and how we launch it. What I absolutely do not want to happen is launch a cryo facility and have it become a small business, because this doesn't accomplish anything, right? Especially because we are doing this vastly different than any of the cryo facilities I've tried in the past. It's a complete for-profit, right? It's completely venture-backed, for-profit. It needs to be extremely fast-paced, especially when we launch. And if we announce, and this is the case for really every cryo facility that exists right now, is you open up your doors, you have people who sign up, and then you kind of sit around and wait for the next person to die, right? And oftentimes that's very there's quite an amount of time between those cases, and for my vision of this and making cryo mainstream and having it be one of those choices alongside burial and cremation for everyone, and getting it into veterinary hospitals. When we announce this, it cannot launch like a small business where we're waiting for the next case to happen. It needs to be, people need to be climbing over each other to get their pets cryopreserved. It needs to be that exciting. It needs to be that desired. So when we, and there's a lot of different approaches to that. I come from, sort of the Gen Z, younger generation communities. A lot of the work I did in the past was with game servers. I know a lot of the Twitch streamers. I know a lot of the famous YouTubers. This is a lot of what we're going to be tapping into to make this exciting. I want kids asking their parents to cryopreserve their pets. I want this to be. I want it to be very young. Historically, cryo is very old. It's a lot of the older generations that are interested in it, both from a talent and community perspective. We're talking with a lot of famous pets, so that the first case that we announce and that we do is a very high profile case. Maybe we do a documentary around it. We've also been talking with filmmakers. So there's a lot that's going on there. From a technical standpoint, we are pretty much ready to perform the first case. Now it comes down to how can we release this so that it is something that can scale like a really fast-paced for-profit. How can I get this to $1 billion valuation in the next couple of years? How can I make cryo something that other entrepreneurs say, hey, I want to jump in and compete in that field? I would love for them to jump in and compete. And I want 100 different pet cryo startups to pop up, and this happens. I had a startup back in 2020, I think, where we were working on remote work. It was a remote work app, and we were doing this cool stuff with spatial audio, because we come from the gaming world, and in the gaming world, you're used to walking up to people and you talk to them and in the game and so on. But in the business world, this was pretty much unheard of, and we put together this app where you're kind of in an office with your team and you walk up to them and you can hear them when you get close to them, and it became a huge hit. And I think we counted it. It was something like 290 or 300 startups that sort of copied us and did the exact same thing, because when we launched, we got all the big investors on board, and we got, I want that for cryo. I want cryo to have that same thing where people say, oh, there's a lot of opportunity here. It's not software, so it's not going to be 300 cryo facilities. It's a lot more difficult, a lot more time consuming. But I think we really do need so much more in this field. And I think that, sort of launching that for-profit area of cryo can really get that done. So that's really where Cryopets is at. And then, as far as LEV in our lifetimes, the way I see it is always preparing for the worst case scenario. And this is why cryo has been my number one, and will really continue to be my number one, because I think we, oftentimes, especially when it's a problem this difficult, the worst case scenario is unbelievably probable. Like, this is probably going to happen. We are most likely not going to just have some therapies pop out and we're all 25 again, going out clubbing and hanging out at the U.S. Transhumanist Immortal Club or wherever we're hanging out with at that time. I think it sounds amazing, but I think it's very improbable. And when it comes to survival, it's a game of probability. We have to be extremely careful. We can't take those risks. We need to realize that we need cryo to be in the position where it needs to be, because chances are we're not gonna hit LEV, and absolutely hope I'm proven wrong, and I hope Hydra contributes to proving us wrong on that. Like I said, I think replacement is the only one that has kind of been like, oh, this could actually work in that amount of time. But I don't think my timelines have changed on that. I think we still need to prepare for the worst case scenario. So
let me continue with a follow-up question concerning Cryopets, because I like what you are saying. We need to make this massive. And as you know, people love their pets as much as they love some of their family members and friends. So I do think that there is that potential. And just one point, out of experience in Spain, where I live, we had this year 3 human cryopreservations, which is incredible. In the first 40 years, we only had 4 patients. And in this year, we had 3 patients. And why? At least partly why is because after we had the first case in March, we held a press round. We called all the journalists so that this was real, that this was happening, and that we had a patient here in Spain. And after that press round, obviously, there were many articles, a lot of media coverage, also in social networks, which is new ways of communicating with people, not just standard media. And then we had 2 more patients this year, which is incredible, incredible. I repeat, from 4 patients in 40 years to 3 patients this year. So I think, yes, you have to make it popular and public, and do a press round after you have your first case. And also, as you said, make a documentary. I think this is fantastic. We need to make this known all over. So congratulations on that thinking, unicorn thinking.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and just a note as well. I think I might have mentioned this in person to you at the Global Cryonics Summit. But our second country after the U.S., as far as people signed up on the wait list to have their pet cryopreserved, is Spain. We actually ended up on a lot of the news networks there, sort of early on when I got the Teal Fellowship. So that was that's cool to see. Yeah, and first of all, it is amazing for cryo. It's like the having those cases, especially after 40 years of not happening, and it goes to show that there is movement finally, which is really exciting. And but the issue is if I take those numbers to a VC, they'll say, what the hell are you doing? This is not an industry. There's no market here. This is a joke. So it's these things, we're seeing a lot of things moving, and they're really impactful and incredible for cryo, but outside of cryo, it's extremely tiny. It's extremely tiny. And we need to, so that's part of what I'm talking about. I even if we got, 10 pets, 20 pets, 50 pets, cryopreserved, it's still extremely small, right? It's very, very small. we need to be doing thousands of pets per year, and getting there is gonna take some really it's gonna take some really unique approaches, and I think it's gonna take getting a lot of young people excited about it and making it cool, not making it weird and fringe. So there's a lot we have going on behind the scenes, including with some of these popular Twitch streamers, and so on, to popularize this, because I think when the younger generation starts to think it's cool, I think we'll really be onto something there. So yeah, I appreciate it, and that's really our goal. Like, we need to invent this industry, basically, because the truth is it really doesn't exist. It's very, very small, almost non-existent, and that's going to take some crafty things. And that's really where I see, I've thought before. I've thought, like, maybe in a perfect world, I would have founded, CryoDAO before Cryopets, because CryoDAO really has been so impactful in funding new research and building a community around cryo, and so many people are aware of cryo that never cared or even heard of it before. And I think it's really starting to jumpstart a lot. But then, of course, I mean, founding Cryopets when I did, getting the Teal Fellowship and all this was, it's hard to, you really can't understate the impact of that. So it's a lot of moving parts. And it's also worth noting where Hydra comes to play in this stuff. It's funny when you talk to cryo people, because everyone says, and I've said this for years, if I wasn't focusing on cryo, I'd be focusing on replacement. Right. Everyone who likes cryo also likes replacement, and vice versa. And they're intertwined in the sense of revival from cryo as well. If people are doing head only, or even if they did full body, there will be a need for bodies. There will be a need for bodies on demand as well. Yes, especially in those cases of head only cryo at the end of life. Clearly, you're going to need a new body, right? So we've even considered doing some replacement stuff at Cryopets as well, and sort of making it these veterinary hospitals of the future, right? Is kind of the idea there before we move to humans. Like, all of this really cool stuff. I think there's some really crazy ways that this all ties in together. And I think we'll kind of see that unfold over the next couple of years.
Yes. Thank you very much, Kai, for those answers, and to Jose as well for posing the questions. I also wanted to bring up a comment that our friend Rudy Hoffman made. He wrote, having been involved in cryonics for 30 years and seeing a lot of false dawns, it may be analogous to AI now, where we are finally seeing real progress, and the significant increase in interest in cryonics, at least on a relative scale in Spain, is one example of this. But I think, Kai, you're also making an important observation that we are still in the very early days of this movement and the various pursuits within it, such as cryonics. The fact that only several hundred people in the world have been cryopreserved and only several thousand are signed up for cryopreservation means we have a long way to go to convince the general public of the viability of cryonics as an option. But I think more research and definitely more advocacy will take us in that direction. So to that end, Rudy Hoffman wonders what experiments are being funded or will be funded by HydraDAO. And in addition to discussing the experiments, if you could discuss the business model a bit, how fundraising will be done. I understand there's a token associated with HydraDAO, and I think that will help set the context for our viewers who may be interested in contributing or may be interested in following the scientific work as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So as far as the business model, if you call it that, these things really are these DAOs are probably just closest to nonprofits, right? And we're really forking exactly what we've done at CryoDAO because it's worked really well to this point. So yeah, there is a token. That's how you do the fundraising. You basically sell this token. The fundraise is actively going on right now. I think we got the first $350,000 in 15 minutes, and I think we're coming up on 700,000, or maybe just a little bit less because Ethereum's been dropping a little bit in the past day or two. But the sort of soft goal, as we call it, is 3 million. When we did our initial raise at CryoDAO, I believe it was about 2.8 million. But now we're coming up on maybe $7, $8, $9 million in the sort of assets under management at CryoDAO. So yeah, there's you purchase the token with Ethereum. That Ethereum goes into the treasury. That's what we use to we transfer that to stable coins or whatever. We use it to fund research, and it basically gives people governance rights over the research. So every token sort of signifies a vote, and when we surface new research projects, when we want to decide to do something different with the treasury, if we want to fund a new program, like for example the CryoDAO fellowship or these different things that we launched before, then sort of all these token holders would vote on that. So you could almost see it as like a you're making a contribution to some cause that you care about, but you now have the ability to actually vote and control where that money goes after your contributions. That's sort of the idea behind it. And there's all kinds of other ways that people use tokens and why there would be a desire for owning a token beyond just the governance, which I won't dive into too much. But there's a ton of benefits to having a token that is sort of on the open market for people. And then in the future, we can either sell more tokens from the treasury, or we can mint a small amount of tokens to do sort of OTC rounds with large funders and things like that. And that allows us to get more money in the treasury. And then really the main way is we can commercialize these research projects. What we found in cryo is that we get almost no deal flow because it's such a small industry, especially kind of the more exciting and moonshot area, part of it that we fund. So we found that we really have to go to these researchers, go to these scientists, and tell them like, hey guys, we have money. Here's what we want to accomplish. Here's on our roadmap. This is what we want to check off next. And we sort of craft these experiments and these projects from scratch. And also because of that, we end up with a significant amount of, or if not all of the IP that comes from the project. Oftentimes these researchers are just more than happy to be getting funding for this stuff, which has literally not had funding since like the 50s or the 60s. With that IP, we can commercialize it, we can start companies, we can license it, whatever that may be. And then that brings money back into the treasury. All of that money goes back into the treasury to fund more cryo research. And the same thing will happen with Hydra. It'll be the exact same, where all that money comes back in and we fund more replacement research. So it's kind of this flywheel of getting money in by fundraising through the token, funding research projects, commercializing those. Money comes back into the treasury, and then we fund more research. And I'm hoping we can get to the point where we're funding, hundreds of millions of dollars of research in replacement. That's really the goal to get to. And there's also sort of like these sub tokens we can launch. One of the examples of that is CryoRat, which we launched at CryoDAO. We wanted kind of a funny, catchy name for it, so we called it CryoRat. But that's the experiment that I was talking about bringing the rat back from high sub-zero temperatures with Ashwin DeWolf, who's leading that project. So where we sold basically another token, sort of a sub token of the DAO, and we raised I think we raised $1 million in 9 hours or something like that. And it's great too because the DAO retains 50% or so of that token, and that sort of brings the assets under management up as well, because the DAO owns a significant portion of it, and which helps a ton of other things. So it's there's a lot of ways that we can get more money in the treasury, fund more research, and that's kind of the quote unquote business model behind it. But it's very much like it's a flywheel where all the money just stays in the treasury and keeps going into funding cool research. And as far as the deal flow calls we've been having for Hydra, which is mostly one of my co-founders at CryoDAO, Eli Muhammad from the Organ Preservation Alliance and Extherma and a ton of other projects, is also here at Hydra as well. And we're it's like we get off these deal flow calls and we're just like smiling cheek to cheek, because it's like there really is not like an overwhelming amount of this research, but the research that is going on in replacement is just like the coolest shit you've ever heard of. There's the one that we did announce, which is the spinal cord fusion project, where I think Michael, and I'm not going to attempt to say his last name. It's on our website. It's a very long Russian last name that I haven't learned to remember yet. But he's had success with I think it was 20 rats and 40 pigs doing this, but full transection of the spinal cord, and then full regaining full motor functionality after resection of the spinal cord, as long as it's quickly after. And of course, when it comes to whole body replacement, this is one of the big hangups is the spinal cord being severed, and it's great. You have this new body, but you can't move your arms or legs or anything, which is not super ideal. I would take it over being dead, certainly, but it's not extremely ideal. So that's a really exciting project. We've been talking with a couple of others, and I won't say their names because some of them are kind of more in stealth, but one of them working on the actual cloning part, where you clone these new bodies without developing the brain. And they've had a breakthrough there that makes the success rate much higher, significantly higher. We've been talking with another project, which is really just like witchcraft. I don't even know a better way to describe it. It's like they're sort of making these organ sacs, where they're sort of knocking out all of the things that don't matter. Like they're not forming the head or the brain. They're not forming the arms or legs, and you sort of just end up with this. I don't want to say torso, because it's really not a torso. It's just like this sack of all the essential organs, because you've gotten rid of everything else that you don't care about. And the theory there is like, you can grow a kidney, or you can grow these other organs, but the key with the organs is they all need each other to function, right? Like all the organs rely on each other. So instead of getting these organs individually, if you could sort of just grow this sack of the whole organ system, and have it ready to go, and have it, I don't think alive is the right word, but just have it existing, right? There's nothing, it's not really an organism. But yeah, you just have this like pod, and they showed us, their first attempts at this in mice, and it's pictures of it, and it's just the most bizarre thing you've ever seen. Is just so cool. I mean, we didn't even have words in the call. We were just like, wow. I mean, this is just like, it really is witchcraft, but in a good way, in a good way. It's like, this is going to save so many lives. It's going to improve so many lives. It gets us so much closer to the goal, and it's just like the craziest thing you've ever seen. So Hydra really has an opportunity to fund a lot of this crazy work that is clearly going to improve lives, but is definitely more controversial. And we have no problem leaning into that. If you know anything about me and sort of my branding and everything over the past couple of years, I lean pretty heavily into that. But we're having real results. So it's like people can't they can say whatever they want, but when we're having these real results from this research, that kind of speaks for itself. So yeah, those are some of the projects that we're talking to right now. But yeah, there's more, and like these things are they're so cool. They really are so cool.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Kai. And for those who are interested in finding out more, check out hydradao.org/projects. There will be more information posted there over time, I'm sure. But the project that is listed there right now looks quite fascinating. It is restoration of motor function after complete transection of the spinal cord, and that is the project in pigs that you were referring to. Now, in terms of essentially creating systems of functional organs, the torso with the various internal organs, and experimenting on mice with that. I wonder if some mouse lifespan studies could be done along these lines, where the replacement approach could be pursued to try to lengthen the maximum lifespans of mice. The reason why this is promising is because mice live a relatively short time. If you have a 4-year-old mouse, you have a record holder there. So the timeframes for those kinds of experiments are quite manageable. Jose says he has another question, so please go ahead.
Yes. Most transhumanists believe not only in biological immortality or the possibility of biological immortality, or even if you prefer immortality, not immortality, but also we believe in the possibility of computational immortality. So it's not just our flesh, but our minds, possibly in a different substrate. And this is important because now there are many experiments connecting our brains to the cloud, and not just Neuralink. Many other companies are beginning to do this, to read our minds in a way. And this is moving also very fast. And Ray Kurzweil, he also believes that in about 20 years, we will have this kind of computational immortality. So my question is, what is your take on that? What do you think about this idea of computational immortality, and how fast is it coming also thanks to artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially since the project that got me into all of this, sparked my interest, was the 2045 initiative, which very much had that approach. They wanted to have a complete synthetic brain and transfer sort of your consciousness or whatever over to that brain. And among other things, I think they even had some crazier things further on the roadmap. But I think it's extremely interesting for many reasons. I think if we talk about true immortality, and we talk about living, 1 million years and all these things, like you can imagine eventually we are not going to be certainly as squishy as we are now. Exactly what that looks like, and how much the caveman principle comes into play, and how human we want to remain and how human we end up remaining. I think these are just like, these are such there's so many ways you can explore those questions. For me, I think there is we do have to be cognizant of it gets a little philosophical for my taste. I mean, I love approaching all of this philosophically, and a lot of my writing certainly does. But it's I think there is a worry that what comes out on the other end is not you, and I think there's a lot of great arguments for that. I think there's also good arguments on the other end. I think we still have so many questions about what is the self, and if you have a clone of yourself, is that also you? And if you transfer it over time, then or if you transfer it while you're conscious, and all these things. I mean, I think it's just it's such a it's a really cool concept, but it seems a little far off in the practical sense. and we really only have we really don't have that much time. So yeah, I think yeah, I think it's a really cool question. I think it's really difficult to answer. It's generally I lean very heavily towards staying biological. I haven't pursued any parts of this that are like the immortality from that angle, because I truly don't I truly don't know. I don't know if I upload myself to you know, the Alcor verse, if it's going to be me, what I think is no. What I think is that wouldn't be, but I try not to make any extremely confident answers on that, because I think there's still a lot we have to explore there, and I think eventually, if we want true immortality, there probably you know, we do have to get less squishy over time, right? Even to avoid things like accidental death. Maybe that looks like, you know, we just look like Atom Smasher from Cyberpunk, where we are 99% cyborg, except we just have our brain sitting in there as well, right? I'm not certain, but I think I really focus on biological immortality, and I think it would take proof that other version of us would be us for me to start working on it, because I think it really is a totally different path. It's like and if it turns out that it's just a clone, that it's not actually being transferred there, then that's a really deep path to go down, just to die, right? Just to end up dead anyway. If I was certainly going to die, then I think it'd be cool to have a clone of myself. I'd probably do it just so that there's Kai, you know, V2 out there. But it would still be death, you know, in my eyes. So it's an amazing question. I mean, there's just so many ways that you can think about that and approach it. It's so difficult to answer right now. Yeah, it's really difficult to answer. So
thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kai. And Mike Lazine points out this is the I-ness issue again. Indeed it is. And here you and I are aligned in my 2010 essay, How Can I Live Forever? What Does and Does Not Preserve the Self? I make the argument against destructive mind uploading in particular, but I also make the argument that even non-destructive mind uploading may be just making a copy, and you still want to preserve the original individual. Again, I wouldn't be opposed to making a copy under certain circumstances. Indeed, there are now services that allow one to interact with historical figures or celebrities, essentially avatars of them, powered by large language models. And these avatars have essentially processed all of the writings of these figures or public appearances, recordings, if these are more recent figures. Indeed, I know of people we know, I won't say who have been approached by these services, and these are living individuals within our community, and these services have offered them the option to have these virtual avatars of themselves. And some of them are just chatbots that post on X and can answer questions, maybe take the load off of these high-profile public figures. But others could be, let's say, full-fledged digital versions. So you could chat with that person via video. And again, it may be useful for people who want to learn about that person and that person's work, but it's clearly not going to be that individual. That individual will be off doing their own thing.
Well, and you say clearly, but there seems to even be some pushback on this, which has surprised me. And even within our community, you know, there's maybe not a lot, but there's been people who do kind of bring up the idea of digital immortality and sort of posting as much as you can about yourself online and having all this information out there so that maybe in the future you could be reconstructed from this information, and any attempt at some form of immortality I always have like respect for, just because being anti-death from any angle is positive, and that's good. But that has always come off pretty silly to me. There's no, with how complicated and complex the mind is, and how many things that you never share with anyone, and all of this. I mean, just the idea that you could form anything close to that based on just like what's on your X profile or something, I think has always been quite silly to me. And certainly it would just, well, I guess I'm saying certainly as well. But again, some people do disagree, but I think it's quite silly that that people think that that might get you back. And of course the goal isn't to have all of us exist for everyone else, because that's essentially all it would be. It would be something that maybe looks like you, sounds like you. Maybe you would have a similar witty remark that you might say to something, but it's just not, it's not you at all. And then we end up with a society of a bunch of LLMs pretending to be people, and I think that just doesn't get us anywhere closer to actually solving the death problem. I think that's probably even like pro-death in some ways. You're putting you're saying like the life part doesn't matter, it's just the like information part. I think there's probably some things that are quite negative about that, but yeah, in general, and that this is even heavily debated within the cryo field, because there's different approaches to brain preservation that some are at least theoretically reversible, some are not, where they're sort of optimized for preservation, but are set up so that the information is just scanned or taken from it somehow and then uploaded and into a different system. So there's definitely a lot of the uploaders within the cryo field, which I'm just I'm not one of. To be fair, at HydraDAO we don't fund any of that. I mean, we funded a survey with like 10 grand that went into like neuroscientists' opinions on what you really need to preserve a brain, and that got into fixation a little bit, but otherwise we really we want full innately reversible cryopreservation of the brain, we try to keep everything with a biological finish line. So that's where we're at with it.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Kai. And we have a lot of feedback on this set of questions. Davi writes he doesn't think a mind upload is a good solution because it is creating a copy, not yourself, or better saying the self that receives the stream of mental images we call consciousness. He also writes, although philosophy of mind is a very difficult subject and a very crucial one too, we want to save the true self, not to copy ourselves and have another person or entity thinking that it was us. And his position seems to be similar to the one that we've articulated. He's not for either a destructive mind upload because he doesn't want to die, nor for a non-destructive one, which is just a copy. Now, Art Ramon also writes a few posts, won't be my entire life's experience. I agree, there's a lot that we don't articulate externally. So actually, that kind of upload or avatar could be a good representation of our public personas, but not necessarily the human being behind those personas, or an indicator of how we might respond to a future unforeseen situation. So, for example, how would Benjamin Franklin respond to the war in Gaza, just to give an example. One could read all of Benjamin Franklin's writings. One could try to analyze his life story, some of his activities during the American Revolutionary War, some of his core ideas, but I still think a large language model would only be able to guess at what Benjamin Franklin's position on the war in Gaza would be, as well as how he would react to the entire early 21st century.
Yeah. And even if it was 100% accurate, it still wouldn't be him. He's still dead.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah.
So it's essentially the vantage point upon the world and the inner experience of the self that we're trying to preserve. And that's irrespective of the content of our minds. It's a lot more basic than that. So you or I could have amnesia, but if we still have our bodies and our brains intact, we would be able to continue perceiving the world as ourselves, and whether we regain some of that old content or accumulate new content, we would still have a continuity of our lives and our awareness of the future. But I've said this before. Mike Lezine writes, Kai makes good points, but each person should decide how they want to gain immortality, have the options available, and let the people decide what they want. And of course, the U.S. Transhumanist Party supports exploring all of these options and discussing them. And we've brought people from various perspectives on our salons, including Kenneth Hayworth and Robert McIntyre, who are very much of this perspective, where they support the aldehyde stabilized cryopreservation with subsequent mind uploading that they, being patternists, essentially think would be enough to preserve the individual. But I'm not a patternist in terms of my perspective. I have a process-based perspective. So I think we need the continuity of the processes of our lives, and that will largely be biological for a while, though it could be consistent with integration with various artificial or cybernetic components. Like somebody who has an artificial heart, for instance, will continue to be that individual. And I do think there's a lot of promise for individual organ replacement as well. The big problem right now with organ transplants is immune system rejection of donor organs. So if one can grow organs that are genetically completely compatible with oneself, that problem goes away. I'm reminded of our friend and U.S. Transhumanist Party Director of Publication, Zach Richardson, who is several years younger than I am. So he's in his early 30s, but unfortunately he had to have a heart transplant that early in life. And prior to that, he was living for several years with an artificial heart. A biological heart is still better right now, and it offers greater long-term survivability. So hopefully he will keep his biological heart. He had his heart transplant in 2022, but I know he has to take medication for life to protect against immune system rejection. And that medication, of course, would leave him immunocompromised in other respects. So I think it would be good for you to discuss a bit more of the efforts for growing specific replacement organs for humans, because I see so many applications of that in the near term in ways that would be completely uncontroversial. If you would tell doctors today, oh, we can grow hearts, we can grow kidneys, we can grow lungs for people, and this will solve all of these problems of immune system rejection as well as organ availability, I think that by itself could create a revolution in medicine. So please tell us more.
Yeah. This is, you brought up so many good points there. It is so bizarre that you have to take these medications for the rest of your life. And we are so, we're so barbaric in organ transplants. We really are. If you were to describe this to someone as like a pitch, and you're like, we're gonna cut the organ out of one person, but it only lasts a few hours, and we got to put it on a helicopter and get it over to this other place, and then that person's gonna have to take these drugs for the rest of their life, and it's gonna cause these problems. I mean, on paper, you'd read this and be like, what the hell, man? Like, you gotta solve a lot more problems before we start doing that. But it's amazing that we can do it as well as we can today. But it's a ridiculous amount of these needs that are unmet, right? There's a huge there's a huge problem with most of these organs that could be available for transplant. This is even without growing new organs. This is just from donors. Most of those organs go to waste. And that's because we don't have cryopreservation. We're not able to put these organs in stasis for when they're needed. So it really is bizarre. It's also a massive market, for this to be solved. So it's a huge focus of CryoDAO. It's a huge focus of HydraDAO. I think together these two organizations are going to greatly advance that. And also with Hydra, we mentioned these other approaches, like you mentioned, having cloned bodies to get these organs from, or maybe it looks more like these organ sacs that I was mentioning, right? So that your body isn't trying to reject this organ forever, right? There's so much to explore there. I mean, there was this amazing paper. I think maybe Sebastian Jiwa was sort of one of the main contributors on it, but a bunch of others. I think it's called "The Promise of Organ and Tissue Replacement to Transform Medicine," or something along those lines. I think it was a couple years back that this paper was published, and it really goes into having organ and tissue replacement on demand is on par, like public health benefits on par with curing cancer completely. And it's probably significantly easier than curing cancer, and probably if we had put a lot of those resources that have gone into the fight against cancer, if even a fraction of those resources were going into some of this technology, we would probably be saving quite a few more lives. 2017. So that's a really fantastic paper that goes into the commercial aspects and just the amount of lives it can save and how many organs are wasted every year, and all these things. It really is. It's a huge focus of ours. It's a reason a lot of people are excited about the work. I mean, the lives that can be saved and improved from it it's hard to even comprehend. So that's definitely a huge focus of Hydra, and I think along with sort of keeping these organs in stasis, we're going to be moving forward a lot of the research that is actually making this a reality. So.
Yes, indeed. And I would encourage anyone who is interested to read the 2017 paper, "The Promise of Organ and Tissue Preservation to Transform Medicine," by Sebastian Jiwa as the lead author. And they have tens of other authors as well, including, by the way, Greg Fahey, Martine Rothblatt, George Church. These are names that are well known within the transhumanist community. So this definitely appears to be a seminal paper in the field. And interestingly enough, Rudy Hoffman in our chat recommended that we consider Sebastian Jiwa as a virtual Enlightenment Salon guest. Let's see what we can do about that in 2025. Now, also, before we proceed to other panel questions, I wanted to make sure we address this one from Alan Crowley. Where can people buy tokens for HydraDAO?
Yeah. There's a link to it on the website. So that's the easiest way to get to it. But it's actually a platform called Juicebox, believe it or not. Very crypto. Everything's kind of named in a funny way, but it's a platform called Juicebox, and anyone can throw in any amount of money, and you get that amount of tokens in return. So it's ongoing. The maximum amount of time that the raise can take is that it would end on January 6th. But we have some mechanisms where if it fills up faster than that, then it closes within 24 hours. There's a ton of huge funders that we're talking to for this one. We want to get some of the tier one firms involved, and some of these. I guess I won't name them just yet because we're the conversations are sort of ongoing, but some of these really big people in crypto and sort of across a few of these fields that hopefully we'll get in the round. So it could very well close sooner than that, but that would be the last date to get Hydra. So it's definitely a good time for anyone who is crypto adjacent or just wants to sort of be involved in everything that happens. I mean, if you hold the token, then you sort of get an inside look at all the research that is going on and help move it through and be involved in whatever capacity you want to. And also we bring on people as like work contributors, where if it's whether it's supplying deal flow or helping with some of the operations or some of the technical stuff, then they can get both USD as well as the token. So, but yeah, Juicebox live right now. That'd be the place to get it.
Juicebox. And in regard to this time window until January 6th, is this analogous to an initial coin offering, which is the crypto analog of an IPO? And after that time window, if somebody wanted to get the governance token, what could they do? Would they need to buy it from an existing holder?
Yeah, that's right. It would after that it would be just traded openly. You can get it places like Uniswap would be the main place to get it afterwards. But yeah, I think ICO as a term doesn't really almost doesn't exist anymore because there were some actually there weren't regulations because the US was a joke with this for a very long time. The SEC, instead of making rules, they would just enforce rules that don't even exist, and it was just a joke. So I'm very happy with the direction the new administration is taking with crypto, and I think we're going to see a ton of innovation there now. But yeah, I think usually that ICO isn't the way that it's referred to anymore. It's more just like token sale or whatever. But similar, yeah, a little bit similar.
Yes, thank you for that answer. It's interesting how these terms originate and sometimes they fall out of fashion or fall into disuse depending on certain events. I do remember ICOs being very popular around 2017, but yes, some of them, let's say, did not work out, and perhaps there's been a movement away from that terminology. But suffice it to say, until January 6th is the time window where people can obtain the Hydra token directly through Juicebox. Now, Art Ramon, do you have a question or comment for Kai?
Probably do some comments. I know recently they announced that they had teeth regrowing. So I'm interested in teeth regrowing. I've got 2 implants right now. They're titanium studs right now, and I'd like to see how that technology develops. I think they inject the tissue and it starts to spontaneously grow a tooth, is what I've heard. But I'm not entirely sure. I know that keeping it biological would deflect a lot of the criticism from some people, kind of like the religious people who say you can't mix iron and clay. That's what they always go to. I see that a lot of that, like in TikTok, a lot of anti-transhumanists speak is not mixing the iron with clay. So I think keeping it biological would be a way to deflect some of that. Probably not all of it, but a good portion. Saying, "Hey, I'm not this cyborg. It's biological." So it might be a way to deflect criticism. Now, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, totally. It's so just on the first thing, I mean, teeth, it would be amazing to be able to regrow our teeth, among many other things. There are these animals that have these superpowers that we don't have. One of those organisms is the Hydra, right? This is another reason that we named it HydraDAO. Is you cut a Hydra in half and it'll grow into two Hydras, grows a whole everything it needs. But not even on just that small of scale. I mean, there's all kinds of these animals that can grow back entire limbs. You have axolotls, you have crabs, you have so many of these animals that have these superpowers, which are just so interesting. I mean, Michael Evans' work in this area is extremely interesting. I would love for us to be able to make it so a mammal can show those same effects. You have a rat that loses its arm and it regrows it back, and I think there's it's not just like you accidentally lose a leg and you can grow a leg back, which by the way would be incredible. You'd have to get your tattoos again, right? But other than that, it really is it's incredible. But I think even more incredible than that is what else it unlocks. What else we'll be able to rejuvenate, what else we'll be able to regrow, what could be doing that constantly within our body. I think there's even an argument to be made that this is like almost a completely different approach to solving aging. And there really is a lot of cool things there. So that's why on the HydraDAO site we have limb regrowth as sort of its own category, but it really does go it does go much deeper than that. And regrowing teeth is certainly another cool thing. I mean, it's one of those things. It's almost something that you don't think about much. Let's say we live to 200 years old, 300 years old. If there's these other things like teeth is one example, but there's also because even if we're treating aging in a lot of these areas, there's some of these maybe underappreciated areas like our bones, our joints. We're going to have probably massive ears and massive noses because the growth doesn't really stop there. And so there's a lot of these things that some are even funny, but we don't think about as much because the problem is extremely complicated, and there's sort of maybe some higher priority things. But teeth is super interesting. And to your next point, as far as being biologically focused, I think this is important. I think it may have been maybe one of the transhumanism really has been an incredible movement, right? I mean, the amount of inspiration and the amount of scientists that surface out of the transhumanist movement, it's really hard to quantify how big of an impact it really has. I mean, entire fields of medicine have been invented because transhumanists were interested in enhancing the human condition in those ways. I do think there is a certain amount of backlash that transhumanism has gotten because of the whole we're going to be cyborgs thing. Like we're going to upload our brains and this. And even if you Google transhumanism or Google image transhumanism, you'll get a lot of the half person, half cyborg kind of things. And I think a biological approach could be impactful. It could work very well. I know that vitalism and a few other things are kind of attempting this. Certainly, it's a lot more biological focused. I think time will tell how those really catch on. But that is, I think I agree with you, and that is the way I see it as well. I think it really can. I think it can be more palatable for people, but also it's what I desire as well. It's not a strategic sort of giving up ground kind of thing. It's I want to be human, right? I very much want to be human. I definitely want to be enhanced, and there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And I have no problem with cybernetic enhancements. I mean, this is like, the concepts there are unbelievably cool. But I think maybe the mind uploading route is probably where people started to get kind of turned off from it, as well as myself. I think the narrative can definitely probably get some help there. So,
all right, thank you.
Yes, indeed, and thank you, Art Ramon, for your question as well. It's interesting when some people talk about not mixing iron with clay. So here is the chemical formula for kaolinite, which is a common clay mineral. Al2, so 2 parts aluminum, Si2, so 2 parts silicon, O5, 5 parts of oxygen, and OH, so that's oxygen and hydrogen, 4 parts of that. What we don't see there is carbon, and you need carbon for anything to be organic, so clay is actually not organic. And it's interesting that they make that analogy when this mineral contains aluminum and silicon, of all things, but that could be a counter to that line of argumentation. But nonetheless, yes, if we can have biological replacement parts for teeth, limbs, organs, that would be an approach that many people would prefer, and it could be much more readily integrated into clinical practice as well. Now, I wanted to also give Ben Ballweg the opportunity to ask a question, so please go ahead, Ben.
I've been trying to think of some like joke of the Cryopets and HydraDAO throughout this broadcast. Something like, if you cryopreserved a Hydra, would that be like redundant or something? You totally wouldn't need to. But anyway, we can think about that elsewhere. I did want to come back to you. Had a comment about that we're reaching a golden age and with this political moment, and you were kind of talking about the crypto space that might be getting some more support. So I wanted to hear more about that. And then you also, right before the broadcast, mentioned the podcast coming up. So if you can tell us more about that as well.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of interesting things are coming together. Start with crypto. Certainly, we've the past years of crypto, the U.S. has been extremely against it, and it really is bizarre, and it even just kind of makes me sad. Oftentimes when we did these fundraisers in the past, and we have sort of a list of the countries that aren't allowed to be included. We have a lot of these whether it's third world countries or dangerous countries, and sort of this list of them, and then the United States along with them. And it's like why is the U.S. in this category? It's completely bizarre. You even have you have these other countries that historically like overregulate and ban things, are even being more welcoming of it than the U.S. So it's been really crazy to see, and it's really driven all innovation in this sector completely outside of the U.S. And I got into crypto in 2017, and so I've definitely seen this through like multiple cycles, and a lot of people going to prison, and a lot of people paying massive fines because the SEC or whoever, they decide what the rules are that day, right? It's been extremely bizarre. Now we're definitely entering a much different time, right? You know, this new administration is much is significantly more or just is pro crypto, and a lot of the people that are being put in and filling up some of these cabinet spots are very pro crypto. And I think David Sachs was just named as the head sort of advisor for AI and crypto. He was historically very pro crypto, and so there's so much room now to bring a lot of this innovation back to the U.S. So that's I think going to be extremely exciting. Not to mention, most likely going to be this strategic reserve of Bitcoin coming up here soon. As soon as Trump is in office, that forces pretty much every other country to follow. And I think the growth of just the entire crypto industry could be really exponential there. So that's pretty exciting. So yeah, I think crypto is entering an age. And that doesn't mean there's never going to be any rules on anything or everyone can just do what they want. But I think that means, regulation does come, which is smart and actually, sets the guidelines on how this stuff works, but also fosters, growth and innovation. Because, HydraDAO is based in Switzerland. CryoDAO is based in Switzerland. We don't, we do fund labs in the US. But other than that, we really don't. We haven't interacted with the U.S. much because of those concerns. And this is across the entire crypto industry. This is across every other DAO. Is that the U.S. becomes sort of blacklisted on everything because of how just about how silly it's been. So. So I think we are going to see, a lot of this innovation take off and a lot of just crypto in general take off, because now the most powerful country in the world is going to be pro crypto, and I think a lot's going to change from that, and it's going to enable us to fund a lot more of this research, and so that's going to be good. I think when I said the golden age of cryo and replacement, I actually wasn't even necessarily referring to crypto there. I was more just talking about the timing of a lot of this research coming together, with Jean Hebert being at ARPA-H, with Jim O'Neill being in working under RFK, I believe, yeah, and and not to mention, I mean, so many more of these cabinet members who are just either adjacent or supportive of our goals. Is I think it's going to be I think there's really going to be an opportunity to move a lot of this stuff forward. And I think the timing for cryo and replacement, plus a lot of the political stuff that is moving forward, and with us specifically, plus the crypto stuff, I think it's just like it's sort of a perfect storm of a lot of this. I think we're going to be able to really accelerate these two industries. I think the next couple of years are going to be wild, for sure. So I can't remember if there was another question, but that's just a comment on that.
Podcast.
Oh yeah, the podcast. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we've been setting up a studio for a little while now to come out with a podcast for both CryoDAO and HydraDAO. The CryoDAO one will be named Icebreakers, and that's the first episode of that will be coming out in maybe not early, maybe like mid-January, something like that. So we'll bring on a bunch of cool scientists and big crypto people and all these different people to talk cryopreservation, because the goal is just to get more awareness of it. Really, the awareness is just still so low. And then we'll be doing the same with Hydra. So I'm not sure what that is going to be named yet. There's been some ideas. Someone, I think Austin from our end recommended it's called Talking Heads. So we have some other ideas floating around, but we'll come up with something, and maybe we'll do the green screens where it's just our heads floating or something. We can be mid head transplant, on the podcast. We'll see. But I think it'll be good to there's really like no content in these fields coming out, right? Like people just have no idea what's going on. And DAOs kind of give a cool, you can really get hands on with the science and see how everything's progressing. So yeah, I think it's a special area, but yeah, so that's the plan with those.
Yes, thank you. So I've spoken before about the early days of YouTube when what I call the talking head videos were quite popular, and perhaps you could revive the talking head video genre, pun intended. Now, I also wanted to raise this, and feel free to be as brief as you'd like in responding this. I do have some serious concerns about RFK Jr. being willing to entertain 21st century medical approaches given his opposition to some staples of 20th century medicine, most recently the polio vaccine, which apparently he and his lawyer, Aaron Siri, want to ban now. And it's very clear that vaccinations were among the basic public health measures that have saved millions of lives, if not billions, from debilitating diseases. RFK seems to want to be more stringent in regard to FDA approvals of pharmaceuticals in particular. And you mentioned, of course, Jim O'Neill being appointed as RFK's deputy. We had Jim O'Neill as a guest in April 2021 on our extensive panel on FDA reform. Anybody who wants to listen to his remarks can watch that video. I do wonder, though, with RFK being in charge of HHS, is that going to make a difference? Is any longevist going to break through to RFK, who seems to be a proponent of the all-natural approach? He is all about ostensibly healthy lifestyles, but for him, a healthy lifestyle would just mean doing what is, quote, natural. He very skeptical of any sort of perceived artificial intervention.
Yeah, I mean, these are all great points. I think a lot of the cabinet members that are being put in under him and around him are going to have a significant impact on this. I think a lot of what he gets fed, a lot of the information that goes in his ear, I think is going to be really, really important for what moves he makes here. I think it's it really is difficult to predict, but a lot of the and there is a little bit that I can't share here, but there's some attempts to get some new cabinet members in and some people around him for this exact reason. I was having conversations sort of all this week about this, funny enough. So there's a few things I can't share in there, but because of some of those things and some of those conversations, I am more confident on how it's going to play out in this area. I think there's certainly and there's I mean there's even these people on like a smaller scale. You see this on X. There's sort of these popular accounts where it's like you don't need anything, just drink raw milk and lay in the sun and that's come back to our primal stuff. And then there's the extremes of that, like Liver King and but he's also, I mean, it's just like taking steroids the whole time. I mean, there's these whole there's a lot of silly kind of movements in that area. I think there is there is good that comes from those, and they get some things right, and maybe they get more things right than sort of the extreme opposite direction. But there's certainly things that they do get wrong at the same time. So I guess that's all I can say about it. You know, I'm confident in the people that are sort of organizing around around it right now, including ones that aren't fully in yet or announced, and it does make me confident on the future of it. But I think we're just gonna have to see. It's another one of those. I mean, the FDA really is this beast that is going to take quite a fight to change how everything works there. But I think we could probably do a 3-hour conversation just on FDA reform. But it sounds like you guys already did with Jim O'Neill, who is definitely the right guy to talk to rather than me for it. So definitely I'll be watching that as well. I actually haven't seen that one. So.
Yes, absolutely. Please check out our special panel on FDA reform. And it's interesting now, perhaps these ideas might become more influential. I certainly hope so. But I think people like Jim O'Neill have an uphill battle to fight, as you mentioned, and people like Marty Makary, who is the nominee for the FDA commissioner as well, but with whom I am sympathetic in terms of what he is likely to try to accomplish. Now, we have about 3 minutes left in our virtual Enlightenment Salon, and we have delved into a lot of areas relevant to HydraDAO as well as to CryoDAO and Cryopets. I wish we could speak for longer, but I do want to give you the opportunity, Kai, to kind of encapsulate this discussion. Any insights that you absolutely want to share, either stemming from what we have discussed or anything additional that you think our audience needs to know?
Yeah, totally. I guess first of all, thanks for having me again. Next company or organization I found, I'll be back. It probably won't be before long. There's so much that needs to be built in cryo and replacement across all of life extension. And I think when people enter the field, when they are maybe less confident, or maybe it's just they don't have these skill sets, they kind of maybe just make like community projects, or they start a new forum for people to organize around. We need more people taking on the actual individual challenges. We need more entrepreneurs coming from the outside. We need more tech entrepreneurs as well. People who are used to sort of fast paced and coming in, and you definitely come in like maybe a little naive, and you're like, oh, we're gonna do this super fast, and then it doesn't end up going that fast. But that's fine. We still need that point of view, that perspective, and that desire to move extremely quickly. In the cryo field, Emil and I both come from tech backgrounds of founding these types of startups, and I think a lot of what we've seen at Tomorrow Bio, at CryoDAO, at Cryopets, sort of still all early days for all these, but sort of these sparks of just actual movement after a very long time of things being stagnant. I think we need much more of that. We need so much more talent in this space. So I would ask people to try to take on the really hard challenges. Don't just settle for like a smaller community or one of these kind of projects. I would really try to take one of these problems and work on them, because you can just do things. I've found that over a long time, is like you can literally just say, I'm going to go do this, and you can go raise the money for it, and you can go start to chip away at the science, and there's literally no one to stop you. It's phenomenal, really. I mean, you really can just do whatever you want. That would be maybe my, hopefully what I hope people take away from this, because I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I don't know how many more organizations I can run, certainly not at the same time. We were joking before we, I think, started the live, that I'm down to like 4 hours of sleep a night here, and next company that'll bring me down to 3 or 2, and we can't do much more than that. I'm running out of time. We need talent. We need entrepreneurs. We need everything. I mean, we need so many more people in the field. So hopefully, if anyone wants to kind of get their jump start in replacement or their jump start in cryo, definitely come join the DAOs. We're spinning out new companies. We already have new companies that we're spinning out. We don't have CEOs for them. We have to end up running them ourselves. Yeah. So please join and help move the mission forward. We desperately need it.
Well, thank you very much, Kai. You are one of the most ambitious entrepreneurs in the longevity field, and this is quite admirable from my perspective. That kind of ambition, that kind of energy is what moves our field forward, and we do hope that this salon will inspire others to follow in your footsteps and perhaps collaborate with you on your current endeavors or your future ones. We would certainly be happy to have you as our guest again for your next organization or for a progress update on Cryopets, CryoDAO, HydraDAO, your thoughts on FDA reform, anything that you would like in that regard. And until then, I hope we can all live long and prosper.